What if the attack you've been trying to fight off isn't a battlefield charge at all? It's a legal indictment? Think about that for a moment. Most spiritual warfare teaching hands you a sword, straps armor to your back, and says resist. Resist the devil. Stand firm. Put on the full armor of God. And that teaching is real. But here's what it doesn't prepare you for. Satan doesn't always storm the gates. In Job chapter 1, he doesn't break anything down. He doesn't sneak past the guards. He walks in calmly, takes his assigned place before the court of heaven, and files a formal charge against a man God himself had already declared blameless. That's not a war move. That's a prosecution, two jobs, two entirely different weapons required. And if you've spent your whole Christian life training only for one of them, you may have been bringing a sword to a trial and wondering why it isn't working. Start with the name itself because the name tells you everything. In the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, Satan is called Satan, and that prefix matters. Ha is the Hebrew definite article, the, not a name, a title, the adversary. Or more precisely in the legal context where the word appears most often, the accuser. This is a prosecutorial office. It's a role with institutional standing inside the divine heavenly court, the same court where the sons of God assembled, where decrees were issued, and where charges could be formally filed. Satan isn't a rogue intruder breaking into the throne room. He's a recognized officer of the court. That realization changes everything about how you read his appearances in Scripture. This is not an outsider lobbing attacks from beyond the perimeter. This is a figure with legal standing, with procedural access, with the recognized right to bring charges before the bench. Now hold that image, the prosecutor, and set it next to its counterpart. Because the same figure who holds that courtroom office also appears in Revelation 12:7-9 as something completely different. A military commander, leading a rebel army of heavenly forces into open war against Michael and his angels. No courtroom here, no procedure, just cosmic combat and a decisive, catastrophic military defeat. Two roles, two completely different modes of operation. For the rest of this video, we're going to call them exactly what they are, the warrior and the prosecutor. Burn those labels in, because your ability to respond correctly to a spiritual attack depends entirely on which one you're actually dealing with. And here's the core problem with most of the spiritual warfare teaching in the Western Church. It almost entirely addresses the warrior, and it leaves the prosecutor almost completely unaddressed. Case File 1, Job 1, verses 6-11. The scene opens in the divine assembly. The sons of God present themselves before the Lord, and Satan comes with them. God speaks first, pointing to Job. Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright. And the prosecutor doesn't flinch. He doesn't dispute the character assessment. He goes straight for the motive. Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. That is a formal legal charge. Not a random temptation, not a battlefield ambush, a carefully constructed argument that Job's righteousness is transactional, a performance calculated for profit, not genuine faith. Notice what makes this charge so dangerous. It's not absurd. It's the kind of accusation that's nearly impossible to disprove from the outside. Of course Job is faithful. Look at what he's been given. Remove the reward, and you reveal the real man. That's a shrewd prosecution, and it required a specific kind of answer. God's answer was not a sword, it was a permission. Let the trial proceed, because the only way to answer that charge is to produce evidence that defeats it. Case File 2, Zechariah 3, verses 1-4. The scene shifts to another heavenly courtroom encounter. Centuries later, the prophet Zechariah is given a vision. Joshua the high priest stands before the angel of the Lord, and the prosecutor stands at his right hand. In ancient Near Eastern legal custom, the right hand is the prosecutor's position. Satan is not hovering menacingly in the background. He is standing exactly where an official accuser stands when charges are being heard. And here's the detail that should stop you cold. The filthy garments Joshua is wearing are real. This is not slander. This is not fabricated evidence. The prosecutor doesn't need to lie. He works with actual failures, real history, genuine moral contamination. The garments are filthy, and that's the case. The charge is technically accurate. This is the prosecutor at his most devastating. Not inventing crimes, but cataloging them, presenting them before the bench with full evidentiary weight. The danger is not that he's dishonest. The danger is that he's right. Case File 3, Revelation 12:10. Now the two roles appear in a single verse, and they collapse into the same figure at the same moment. After the great dragon is hurled down, defeated in open cosmic warfare, the voice from heaven announces, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before God day and night, has been hurled down." The defeated military commander is simultaneously identified as the courtroom accuser. And look at the language: day, day, and night. This is not occasional harassment. This is an ongoing, institutional, unrelenting legal campaign. A prosecutorial office that never rests. Not reactive, but continuous, filing charges, presenting evidence, making the case against believers without pause. The defeat of the dragon on the battlefield is presented as inseparable from the silencing of the accuser in the courtroom. Two roles, one entity, and in Revelation 12, both roles reach their crisis point at the same moment. Revelation 12, verses 7 through 9. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. This is open, declared, large-scale cosmic warfare. Armies, a general, a battle with a decisive outcome, expulsion. The warrior role is not subtle. It's not procedural. It's force meeting force in direct confrontation, and the warrior loses. The spiritual warfare tradition built around this model is real, and it is necessary. When Paul writes in Ephesians 6 about putting on the full armor of God, the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit, he is addressing an opponent who operates in power, who exerts direct pressure, who can be resisted. When James writes, "Resist the devil and he will flee from you," that instruction maps cleanly onto the warrior model. External spiritual opposition, direct demonic pressure, the kind of frontal assault that you engage with spiritual authority and active resistance. This is not wrong teaching. It works. It's biblical. The problem isn't that the battlefield model is incorrect. The problem is that it's incomplete. It accounts for one mode of operation and leaves the other entirely unaddressed. You can be brilliantly trained in battlefield resistance and still be completely vulnerable. Because when the attack shifts courtrooms, your sword is the wrong weapon entirely. Against the warrior, the tools are authority, resistance, and spiritual power. You stand, you resist. You exercise the authority that Christ has delegated to those who belong to him. This works when the attack is a battlefield charge. But you cannot outshout a legal indictment. You cannot resist your way out of a prosecution. When someone files charges against you in a court of law, the correct response is not to fight harder, it's to secure a defense. And the New Testament is extraordinarily specific about where that defense comes from. 1 John 2:1. My dear children, I write this to you so that you will not sin. But if anybody does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous one. The Greek word translated advocate is parakletos, literally one called alongside to speak in your defense. It is a legal term, a defense attorney, and John uses it in direct contrast to what has just been described. Sin, which is precisely the kind of evidence the prosecutor tables in court. The cross was not only a battle, it was a verdict. Revelation 12:11 describes how believers overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. The blood of the Lamb doesn't merely cover sin in a casual emotional sense, it makes prior evidence inadmissible. Once the verdict has been rendered at Calvary, the prosecution's case has been dismissed. The evidence was not destroyed, it was answered. The charge was not ignored, it was adjudicated. The blood functions as a legal declaration. This case is closed. And this is exactly what happens in Zechariah 3. The Lord doesn't argue with the prosecutor about the state of Joshua's garments. He doesn't contest the evidence. He rebukes the accuser and commands, "Take off his filthy clothes." And then, "See, I have taken away your sin, and I will put fine garments on you." That is substitution. That is a legal act. The answer to the prosecutor is not a counterpunch. It is a declaration by the judge himself. This defendant is covered, and the case will not proceed. Here's the symptom that tells you which role is active. If you've confessed something and it's truly forgiven, but the guilt won't lift, if shame keeps resurfacing weeks or months after you've already brought it to God, if you find yourself spiritually paralyzed by the memory of specific failures, haunted by a precise and detailed recollection of what you did and what it means, those are not battlefield wounds. Those are prosecutorial pressure. The prosecutor is rehearsing the evidence, replaying the case file, arguing that you have no standing before God and that your failures disqualify you from approaching the throne. And here is the crucial point. When you respond to that pressure with spiritual warfare techniques, when you try to resist the guilt, when you white-knuckle your way through it, when you rebuke it and command it to leave, you're bringing a sword to a trial, and it's not working because you're in the wrong courtroom. The correct response to a prosecutorial accusation is to appeal to the verdict already rendered, not to fight harder, not to feel less guilty through willpower, but to point to the advocate, the parakletos, standing at your right hand, counterpart to the accuser at the other, and to rest the case on the blood that already answered every charge the prosecutor can bring. The pattern runs all the way back through Scripture. In Job's courtroom, God's answer to the charge was not a counterattack. It was a declaration of Job's integrity and a permission to let the evidence speak. In Zechariah's courtroom, the Lord's answer to the prosecutor was not a debate. It was a rebuke and a substitution. In Revelation 12, the defeat of the accuser is attributed not to superior force, but to the blood of the Lamb and the word of testimony. Every time the courtroom opens, the answer to the prosecution is the same in structure. Not resistance, but declaration. Not combat, but appeal to an authority higher than the charge. The case that was filed against Job is structurally identical to the case that runs against you. The charge is the same. Your faith is insufficient. Your standing is compromised. Your failures are on the record. And the dismissal that was applied to Joshua, clean garments, a formal rebuke to the prosecutor, the judge's own declaration, that dismissal applies to you too. The verdict has already been rendered. The prosecution's case was dismissed at Calvary. The question is whether you know it well enough to stand on it when the accusations start. Two roles, two entirely different responses required. If you're under a battlefield charge, pick up your sword. If you're under a prosecution, appeal to your advocate. Know which fight you're in before you choose your weapon, because the worst thing you can do in a courtroom is start swinging. If you've been trying to resist guilt or fight off shame and it hasn't been working, open 1 John 2:1 this week. Read it slowly. The title it gives Jesus, a parakletos, your defense attorney, is not an accident. It is a precise, structurally specific answer to the prosecutor's office. Drop a comment below and tell me, which role did your church teach you about, and which one did it skip? That answer tells you a lot about the gaps in your spiritual formation. And if this kind of close-reading biblical theology is useful to you, subscribe. We do this every week here on Bible Made Clear.